How's everybody doing? Yeah, good. You excited to be here? It's close to happy hour, isn't it? Yes. All right. My name is Rob Roderick, and I'm with the National Tile Contractors Association. How many NTCA members do we have in the audience? A bunch of you. That's fantastic. For those of you that are not members, just to tell you a little bit about the association, we've been around for 70 years. We're a nonprofit organization. We got over 1,500 members across the United States, and I'm a technical trainer for them. I'm also on their technical answer committee where our members can call us and ask questions. And one of the biggest trends that we've seen as far as answering technical questions in the last few years is about lippage. And what's happened to our tile industry, let's say over the last 20 years, what's happened to the size of the tile? That's right, they keep getting bigger. And what's happened to the grout joint size? It keeps getting smaller and smaller. And there's standards for that basically in our TCA handbook, and we always teach to the TCA handbook and the ANSI standards. Those will protect you. They'll decrease your liability and increase your profitability. But the theme for this week is we're talking about the NTCA reference manual. It's a great resource. You all should have it. And what we're going to talk about today is lippage control devices. Oftentimes they're referred to as leveling clips. But we've tried to make a move to call them lippage control devices because when the consumer, maybe an architect or a homeowner, hears the word leveling clips, they think of the word level with using a level, and they really don't level anything, but they do reduce lippage. And there's actually standards for how much lippage is allowable found in our TCA handbook and in ANSI, and it's found in a chart form. It's based on the type of tile, the grout joint size, and most of the stuff that we set nowadays is a calibrated pressed floor tile. And with the grout joint sizes that we use, usually the acceptable amount of lippage is a 32nd of an inch. And you know what the thickness of a 32nd of an inch, you were over at the other one, right? That's the thickness of a credit card, okay? Now with that, we can also add the warpage, the actual warpage of the tile. And part of the manufacturing process of tiles is they're fired. And when they're fired, they can become warped. We'll kind of do a quick review about mortar coverage. You can see here he's wet down that surface. He's got the dust off of it. He's gave it a little bit of a drink. That's going to allow his mortar to work well. Sometimes on very porous surfaces, if we put that mortar on it and we haven't wet that surface down, it can actually draw that moisture out of the mortar, weaken the mortar, and affect the process of curing. So he wet that down. He's now burning it in or keying it in to the surface. And then he's going to do some directional trialing, which we kind of did a demo on before. Now the one takeaway out of everything that I say in the next 30 minutes, there's one thing that I want you guys to walk away and remember. There's a whole group of people who are using these lippage control devices and they say, hey, the floor's kind of jacked up. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use these and that's going to fix it. That's not what these are designed for. Remember when I said we have a 32nd of an inch allowable? Well, that's like human error. That's our allowable. This can get rid of that, okay? It can make it absolutely beautiful. So this isn't designed to keep you from prepping the floor. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with the standards for substrate flatness, but there's basically two major standards that you need to be aware of. One of the standards is for large format tile, and large format tile is any tile that has one side that's 15 inches or larger. The other standard is for all the tiles that are smaller than that. And the standard for large format tiles is we can't have any deviation in the surface that we're getting ready to tile. And when I say deviation, I mean we can't have a hump or a dip of more than 1/8 of an inch and 10 foot. So we got to make sure that our prep is done in order to use these. You can see he's combed directionally. We've got a rectangular shaped tile. Now the important part of him combing that mortar directionally this way, perpendicular to that long side, is when he rocks that tile back and forth on those ridges, he's letting that air escape and he's collapsing the ridges, and that air only has to travel 3 inches in both directions. Let me grab a piece of tile. So if he was to trowel this way, and he had his ridges running this way, and he moved his tile like this, of course the air now has to travel 12 inches this way, 12 inches that way. The direction that he's troweling is important with these rectangular tiles. So we've got several different lippage control devices out here. I've got them out on the end of the stage. Looks like the first one he's using is this particular product here. This one basically spins on. And of course we got our foot that we put in. This slides underneath one edge of the tile. The other side slides underneath the other edge. And it's got this cool plastic cap. Now, with a particular lippage control device like this, one thing that you have to be a little bit concerned about is our mortar has sand in it, has aggregate in it, right? And so as we turn this, and that if there's any mortar underneath there and we have a highly polished surface or maybe a stone, when we're turning that, it can actually scratch the surface of the stone. So they've got this great little spacer here. And what that does is it sets down on the stone. It allows you to turn it, and it doesn't push that sand or that aggregate and mess up that sheen on the surface of a polished stone. Now you can see here he's got a spacer in there. He's got a 3/16 of an inch spacer. Reason being, with calibrated tile, generally speaking, our standard is for grout joint minimum size, the smallest grout joint that we can have with a tile is no smaller than 3 times the deviation of the tiles themselves. What I mean by that is if I have this group of tiles and I look at them and they all deviate just a little bit in size, let's say a 1/16 of an inch. The smallest grout joint I would want with this particular tile is 3/16 of an inch. Okay, so it's 3 times the deviation in the size of the tile. So with how that normally shakes out is with calibrated tile, which is what we use day in and day out. It basically comes off an assembly line. It's sorted by size, put in boxes. They put caliber numbers on them. 3/16 of an inch. So that's what he's using here. With a rectified tile though, they're ground to be perfectly parallel on the edges and perfectly square on the corners. An 1/8 of an inch generally is the smallest grout joint that you could have. A 1/16 of an inch is the smallest that you should ever have, and that's with natural stone generally. So you can see he's got his plastic caps on there protecting the surface, even though this isn't anything that probably would scratch with a little bit of thin set, but you can see how that would work with a natural stone. All right, so what's our next one we got here? Let's see. Okay, now a lot of these have different guns and different devices that you can use. We have a different one here, and it has this strap. Looks very similar to the other one, but this is the cap that goes on. It even has an NTCA logo on there. You guys see that? So this can slide up in here. We have a gun, and then this gun has several settings on it. And you can set the tension on the gun. You see the numbers on here? Also, there's an S on there. If you turn it to S, that's to snap it. It's the way that you break it off instead of going and kicking it or using a rubber mallet to break those off. So I better give him his gun back here. Now it also comes with, if you have a highly polished surface, this particular one comes with a little rubber boot on the bottom, kind of similar to that plastic cap. It's going to protect that highly polished surface from getting some aggregate from the thin set and then that pressure actually scratching it. So how many people here use these devices? All right, and let me ask you this. How many people started using them when they first saw them? A few people, really? Okay. All right. When I first saw them, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know about that. But then after I started using them, I thought, man, these are fantastic and they're great tools. And they're actually in our standards now. Did any of you see the big panel installation that we did over here in the installation experience? Well, you know what? We have new standards for those big panels, the GPT, gauge porcelain tile panels. And in those standards, we've got standards for the product itself, and we have standards for how to install the product. One of the standards for how to install the product is you have to use one of these lippage control devices. It's mandatory for the big panels. Not mandatory for all these tiles. You can see he's tightening them down here. I might pass that around. Well, I'll pass, you know, no, I mean the, yeah. Oh, we need to snap them, don't we? Yeah, we'll need that to snap them. When we're done with this, guys, come up here and look at all of these. Question? Well, and that's the one reason I wanted to get into the minimum grout joint size. So the question was this: some of those, can we use those for tile spacers? Well, they could work for tile spacers, except for it may be a smaller grout joint size than what's allowable by the industry. Again, the standard for the smallest grout joint that we can have is 3 times the deviation of the tiles. That means if the tiles are different in size, whatever that difference is, 3 times that is the smallest grout joint. So generally speaking, with a calibrated tile, 3/16 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch with rectified, and a 1/16 of an inch for stone. But that's a great question. Can we use that? Well, it depends on the grout joint size, and normally speaking, with a tile like this, 3/16 of an inch would be the minimum that we can use. So we have another one here. This one is a little different. It has a clip and a wedge system. And some important things to think about when you are using these is to think about, you know, can I remove that strap, or can I remove that clip in order to get in there and clean out that thin set? Some of them are real easy to do that, and some of them are not so easy. So that can be something to think about. Now he's also got a tool, if you can, I'll show you that tool as soon as he's done with it here. Maybe you can slide over and show him what you're doing, just a little bit. So basically the wedge slides in here. Too strong. He's got a kung fu grip. This guy, we got a board behind here. It weighs 150 pounds. I said, let me help you with that. And he's like, nope, got it. So let me see your tool there in that bucket. Okay, so you can see we've got these pliers here. And what he did was after he put the wedge in, he set the pliers like this, okay? It's got these 2 feet on it that are actually hitting the foot, and it's got this back part that's pushing the wedge in. So it's pushing them in tight, putting tension on it, pulling the tile down. Let's see what else. Okay. Go with this one next. All right, here's another one that has a tool, a tension tool on it. Our cap looks something like this, our strap looks something like that. Slides in there. So this is how we would tighten it, okay? Basically, we snug it down against our tile. We slide this in there, and then we can pull it down and pull those tiles together and make it nice and tight. What do you think about showing them that wall, Randy, that we built? Okay. All right, we've got one. Yesterday, we already installed a wall. And remember, the biggest thing I want you to walk away with from this is to realize this is not going to fix your floor if it's out of flat. It will give you a nice finished look. You know, some guys oftentimes will do spot bonding and stuff to fix little spots, and in the end it looks good, but it sounds hollow in places. It's very vulnerable to being broke. It doesn't meet the standards for mortar coverage. You know, we got standards for how much mortar we should have on the back of our tile, which is 80% for a regular interior installation and 95% for an exterior or wet installation. So even though that spot bonding and some of these other processes may give you a nice finished look, in the end you've got an installation that's very vulnerable to being broke and a little bit of liability involved. So we'll move this board over. We're going to show you the edge. Which edge are we showing them, Randy? This one?
This is right here.
Okay.
I got it.
We need to point it straight that way. I want to pull this back. That thing is heavy. All right, so this looks like a child's playground thing. We got to work on it yesterday. It was a lot of fun. Okay. And some of you feel free to come up here and look at this. Now, this is really flat right here. You can run your hand across it. Let's turn it around. Look at all the variety of these things. We ended up with a really, really flat finished product. But let's turn it over this way. And I want you to look at the edge of this.
I got it.
You guys see what's going on there? And I'll turn it to the audience. Our substrate has all kinds of humps and dips. I want to turn it. Can you see all those gaps? We got a nice flat floor, but we've got all these voids in the end where we've got tile that isn't supported. So we don't want people to think, hey, my floor's jacked up, I can just use these leveling clips and it's going to make everything okay. Let's go ahead and take a couple off. Yeah, we want to lay it down. See what kind of coverage we got. Now we'll talk about breaking these off too. With this particular one, right? Let's show them first, Randy, about how to remove the clips. With this particular one, you just kick and you break them off, right? Now some of these others, we've got tools.
You just spin back off.
The just spin off. The one I showed you earlier, the tension, we turn it to S. Okay. That one's already, is it to S? Oh. That one's off. Huh? There we go. I think they got banged around a little bit. They're behind stage in the last 24 hours. There we go. So anyway, when I want to remove this particular system here, I want to either hit it with a mallet if it's on the wall or kick it perpendicular like this and break it off. Same way with these. All right, now you saw how flat that was. Look at the mortar coverage. I'll hold that up. So this is the kind of problems we've seen where people, have a nice finished floor because they use these, but in the end, they really didn't have any mortar coverage at all. Has anybody ever seen anything like that? Makes you a little sick to your stomach, doesn't it? I could show you 1,000 pictures of these. So we got to make sure that we got the right amount of coverage. We got to make sure that we prep the floor the right way. We want to remember our grout joint size. I want to follow the directions of the manufacturer of the product always. So any questions about lippage control devices? Go ahead. Great question. Do lippage control devices create voids? When used improperly, they certainly could. If you stick a lippage control device underneath the tile and you decide, hey, I don't want it here, I want to move it here, and you slide it over, you now have created a void. Okay, if you put it in, you need to leave it right there. You don't want to move it around, slide it around, because it could create some voids. And some of them, the manufacturers of the lippage control devices don't want you to put them a certain distance away from the corners and edges and things like that. It's a great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, the question is there a maximum height And the surface of that you're going to tile? Okay. The surface before we put tile on it, there's standards. And there's 2 standards. One of them is for large format tile. That's the tile, any tile that has one side that's 15 inches or longer. And the standard for that is we can have no hump or a dip of more than 1/8 of an inch in a 10-foot radius. Okay, that's how flat it has to be. Now, I don't know about the concrete where you guys live, but I can tell you that's like a unicorn from where I'm. So what that tells us is almost every job that you go on, you're going to need to do some surface prep. Okay, and one thing that we encourage our members to do is when you're sending out estimates, send out estimates with disclaimers that say all surfaces to be tiled must meet the TCA standard of no deviation of more than 1/8 of an inch in 10 foot. Or there will be additional prep required that's not reflected in this estimate. Now, if we're laying smaller tiles, that don't fall in that large format category, the standard is actually 1/4 of an inch per 10 foot. But even then, that's a difficult place to find concrete and walls that are that good. And one of the problems that we've seen is people oftentimes, and just probably every tile guy has done this at one point or another, has used thin set to fix or prepare his walls. Well, thin set isn't designed to be used in that way. Thin set's designed to be used in a uniform thickness across the wall. But got any more questions? We've got 2 minutes and I got to clean up this stage. Any more questions? I think you guys are the best looking audience I've seen so far. I want you guys to all go out and have a drink, have fun. Oh, question. Well, the question was, when you remove the clips, does it ever leave a void? Well, the bottom part, the foot of the clip, stays in there. So the only thing you're breaking off is the part in the grout joint. Yeah, so you'll grout over it. So there's a weak point that's right there at the bottom foot. And I've got some of these up here, and you guys are welcome to look at them. I know we have another group getting ready to get on, so we're going to get out of their way. Thank you so much. You've been a great audience. Appreciate you.